In part 4 of these teachings, the Dalai Lama continues the discussion of emptiness, the recognition that persons and things have no intrinsic reality of their own, that grasping at an objective self and world leads us to suffering, and that critically seeing through its supposed intrinsic reality leads to freedom or enlightenment. But even if we recognize intellectually that this is the case, uprooting the false view of reality from the depths of our consciousness is a difficult task. How difficult? Well, you'll hear the Dalai Lama using the word eons when talking about it, though he also encourages us that meditation can greatly accelerate the process. The fourth noble truth is the path that leads to nirvana, to the cessation of suffering. The Dhammapada tells us that the path consists of right understanding, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The Dalai Lama explains that, looked at from the Madhyamaka Prasangika point of view, no matter how you analyze the path, it comes down to the deepening understanding of emptiness and ultimately to its direct intuitive realization. In order to come to this stage, however, it's necessary to prepare the ground by proceeding in order along the three paths: the path of accumulation, the path of application, and the path of seeing. The path of accumulation is the stage of analyzing the philosophy of emptiness and coming to the conclusion that it must be the correct way to understand reality. The path of application refers to the stage where the individual attains some experiential knowledge of emptiness in meditation. But the path of seeing is when there is the intuitive realization of emptiness directly, and then gradually the afflictions, in increasing subtlety, are abandoned at their root totally and completely. So the deepening realization of emptiness is at the heart of the Buddhist path, and this must be brought about by the union of one-pointedness of mind, or shamatha in Sanskrit, with this insight into the true nature of reality, or vipassana, critical seeing. Without one-pointedness of mind, there can be no progressively deepening insight, because without strong concentration, how can insight progressively arise? And without an ethically sound way of life, how can there be any real development of one-pointedness of mind? If one's actions weigh heavily on one's conscience, they will impede the ability to concentrate. And finally, without a genuinely deep compassion, how can there develop an ethically sound way of life? As the Dalai Lama points out, compassion is the foundation of the Buddha's teaching. In Mahayana Buddhism, bodhichitta, the spirit of enlightenment, is the will to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others. Returning to the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, the Dalai Lama reflects that it is the profound understanding of suffering that makes us genuinely compassionate first to ourselves and then to other human beings. As long as we see ourselves as different, as long as we see ourselves as separate, there can be no genuine feeling of compassion. It's only when our compassion is born out of a completely honest sense of equality with all others, enemies and opponents included, that we begin to be capable of walking the paths of freedom to reach the goal. So here now is the final chapter in this remarkable series of teachings on the Four Noble Truths.
자상가 나 독립 주식이 riba mangu yungu yare das riba kyabo tenjung tenjis labare.
We were talking about emptiness during the last session, and when it comes to the exposition of the Buddhist doctrine of emptiness, we find in the literature there is a lot of various forms of reasoning, or various forms of reasoning to try to arrive at the understanding of emptiness. And among all of these different forms of reasoning, the reasoning based on the understanding of dependent origination of things is considered to be the most effective.
나 tenjungi kowa 지집에 차야 돼. 패지 나타고 중지 나타고다 무더벌지 중지 사시 인사래.
And in order to have, I think, to develop the most profound understanding of the meaning of the Buddhist doctrine of dependent origination, or pratitya samubhada, I think perhaps the literature, the works of Buddha Palita and Chantakriti seem to be very critical, very, very, very important.
So dan nge de sha de shu da mang she di jerm shi sum shi sha jeng she de yo re. Di jerm shi sum di bet catch yon so di yana Buddha Palita. Yana da so phe da da cha be da shung kan yo ji. Ka so re. Da shung de kong su chang do sha ji ja sa sha re. De so yin zane a de nge sha do se.
So much of my own understanding, and also, of course, the presentation here on topics of dependent origination and topics of emptiness is based on Lama Tsongkhapa's exposition and presentation of these topics. And Lama Tsongkhapa's own presentation is very much based on the reading of Nagarjuna by Chantakriti and Buddha Palita, so much so that almost every crucial points in his understanding of these concepts or of these principles, Tsongkhapa substantiates by referring to the works of Buddha Palita and various commentaries of Chantakriti.
Dan di shi ga and za shu na la ya. Any 大概是培训你数字品的就是，在早些的话，都上大学课里啊，你看唐国的这样的养老主任，等养老主任都送下个什么第一代，第什么可是你说出名了，陈爱呗，养老主任送下的什么的什么说出不得，走不得，真对，培训说出的是没有。 但你谈过的对待，但呢，让去找也不对，第一节了呀，俺的让去培训你收不是，你收不没着，现在我在电脑了呀，因为人性慢呐，因为尴尬，老说话因为take嘛的，但当然电视take嘛的，但当然因为叫什么take嘛的，现在。 我们出这么个，出这么个，这么个什么的了呀？怕，因为看那个出这么个问题，因为怕，但何说嘞？但难解要的是，看那个难解要的是呢，出这个出样的用说的怕乱的，怎么怕乱的？因为这样的，实但你因为电中国的肯定是么的，修是到啥不差的。
My own understanding of Chantakriti and Buddha Palita's interpretation through Tsongkhapa's understanding of interdependent origination through Buddha Palita and Chantakriti is based on the reading of the 23rd chapter of Madhyamaka.
No. No. Buddha Palita da the success da jugoran da subject then is khaga.
Sorry, I start again. When I'm studying Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka Mula Karika, which is the fundamental treatise on the middle way, I combine the 23rd chapter, which deals
most
with...
probably it's the 23rd.
Probably it's the 23rd, but it's the chapter that deals with the 12 links of dependent origination. I combine the study of that chapter with the 18th chapter, which deals with the Buddha's understanding of the doctrine of anatman, no soul theory, and then these two. So in the 18th chapter, it principally deals with the understanding of the Buddhist doctrine of no soul or no self theory, and how grasping at such Atman, this eternal principle, this substantially real soul, binds us in the unenlightened existence, and how negation of that, how overcoming of that, elimination of that grasping leads to liberation. And so my understanding of these two chapters are combined. So the point of that chapter, particularly the 18th chapter, is to outline or underline the critical importance of the need to gain insight into emptiness. And then study of these two chapters are then combined with the 24th chapter, in which Nagarjuna entertains various objections from the realist schools, the principle of which being, these are Buddhist realists.
다 가야 해서 넘겨야 되게 가서 저질래서 다 정신면은 엔다 지 단다 메덴다 상당에다 샤스메 되지 다 뒤져가지고 엄마가 잡아들어 엄마가 잡아디 다스 잡아 말아 삼도 쉬우 땅네 잡아도 저인 거야 근데 잡아지도 거 살에 jel이야 아니 파래 때문에
So in the
랜 때문에 간다 내 정신을 봤어야 돼 땡중 그런 정신을 봤어요 그다
So in the 24th chapter, Nagarjuna anticipates objections from the Buddhist Buddhist schools. The central point of their objections is that if there is no intrinsic reality, if there is no intrinsic existence and identity to things and events, then there is nothing. Therefore, there cannot be Four Noble Truths. If there are no Four Noble Truths, there cannot be the three jewels. If there are no three jewels, then there cannot be the path. Therefore, there cannot be anything. There cannot be a path to enlightenment. To which Nagarjuna responds, actually by turning, as it were, reversing the sort of criticism towards them. It's almost like turning the objections towards them by saying that, on the contrary, if things exist with intrinsic identity and intrinsic reality, then the consequences that you have charged to me would follow. If things do possess intrinsic reality and objective reality and intrinsic reality, then they cannot be Four Noble Truths. They cannot be causal processes. The cause cannot produce effect, and so on. So the central message that comes from that chapter is to demonstrate that what Nagarjuna means by emptiness is not a mere nothingness, not a mere non-existence. His emptiness should be understood in terms of interdependent nature of reality, that things are devoid of independent existence. They possess dependent origination, and it is the very fact of their dependent nature that they are absent of independent existence.
저자는 별이 다 니자가는 들이야 소리 개바치 공기 동바 시저 전세에 동배 되미 댐배데 동바 시저 사디 동바 시저 전시 가서요 at the last 동바 시저 전세에 그러잖아 that just 동바 시저 전세에 동배 되미서 동바 시저와 전진 누베 동배 되 말이스 동바 시저 전세에 동배 되미 댐배데 야제 땡중 시저人性就准备对面就没出其实懂得땡중 게 자들 레벨 내봐나 시직라는 낭동이 민게도 몇지그
One of the sort of recent masters of Tibetan Buddhism, I think he was
another Amdo.
I think he was around the turn of this century, sort of early 20th century Tibetan Amdo master. He's, by the way, he's from the same native. He stated in a beautiful, he articulated this point in a beautiful verse. He said that empty here in this context does not mean the absence of functionality. And what then is the meaning of emptiness? It is the empty it is the emptiness of real existence or absolute existence. Dependently originated. Dependently originated does not entail intrinsic reality or intrinsic identity. What it does entail is a phenomenal reality, like illusion-like phenomenal reality. So when you understand the meaning of emptiness and dependently originated, then you will be able to posit simultaneously within one locus the idea of emptiness and appearance without contradiction. Similarly, the same master said that it is common to all philosophical schools to try to talk about, try to sort of describe their own position as avoiding the extremes of absolutism by talking about some form of emptiness, and avoiding nihilism by talking about the level of phenomenal reality. But when you reverse that, it is only when you reverse the process that you will be able to overcome all forms of clinging. So that is the Madhyamaka Prasangika's position, of course. From the point of view of Madhyamaka Prasangika, it is the appearance that liberates the person from grasping onto absolutism. And it is the emptiness, once you understand the true meaning of emptiness, that liberates the person from falling into nihilism. Earlier I spoke about there being a difference between, even within the Madhyamaka school, two different understandings of the concept of emptiness. I spoke about how Madhyamaka Svatantika's view differs from the Madhyamaka Prasangika's view. The basis for accepting this difference comes from Bhavaviveka's writing, where Bhavaviveka, one of the chief disciples of Nagarjuna, subjects the Buddhist realist schools to very critical examination and sort of argumentation. And at the same time, he also criticizes Buddhapalita's reading of Nagarjuna. So through these two different criticisms directed at two different schools, one can see that Bhavaviveka's position emerges from these critical processes. And the essence of his position is that although absolute existence is denied, but there is an acceptance of some form of intrinsic reality, some form of objective reality to things and events, which is totally rejected by the Madhyamaka Prasangika. So even among Madhyamaka Prasangika masters like Chandrakirti, so although both Chandrakirti, Buddhapalita and Bhavaviveka, these are great disciples of Nagarjuna, we see that there is a substantial philosophical difference in their understanding of Nagarjuna's philosophy of emptiness. And it's because of this difference, Tibetan sort of Buddhist scholars sort of understand that there is a true division within the Madhyamaka school and give them the label Madhyamaka Swatrantika school and the Prasangika school. One of the bases for such distinction is that there seems to be quite a big difference in their adoption of method as well. In the Madhyamaka Prasangika school, there's a much greater emphasis on using what is called the consequentialist style reasoning, which is more like kind of reductio absurdum, where you are not so much trying to, you are not so much using reason to affirm something, but rather you are concerned more with showing internal inconsistency within a particular opponent's standpoint. Whereas Madhyamaka Swatrantikas tend to use much more syllogistic type of reasoning to establish kind of some form of positions. And so, given this difference, there is also a fundamental difference between Bhavaviveka and Chandrakirti about how our sensory perceptions perceive sort of material objects. To Bhavaviveka, when a visual sort of perception arises, insofar as the appearance of the objective entity is concerned, there is an element of sort of validity there, because Bhavaviveka accepts that things do possess a degree of objectivity, which is then projected onto the perception, which is totally rejected by Madhyamaka Prasangika school of Chandrakirti. So, on this basis, we know that the central point of sort of difference between the two Madhyamaka schools is whether or not one accepts any idea of intrinsicness.
지금 믹서기 쉐발이야. 아니 유 강나나야. 아니 딜 견디네 예배 랑생 철로 달았더니 추셔봐도 뭐 추가 메시가 돼. 추인스가 돼. 자장가 견디네 두버지 능기할 때 나오는 시 요마레스. 단디도 상상스담이나. 말아서 차단으로 깨인잖아요. 차단으로 깨인잖아요. 차단께서 유대 담버 담버 메시는 담버 능기여지 다 안데 디세브 차사와.
The reason why understanding of this subtle point is important is that if one were to relate this point to one's own personal experience, then we can see that when strong emotions arise in us, say a strong attachment or anger, if we examine the sort of the experience of that emotion, we will see that there is underlying that strong emotional response to a particular object or event. There is an assumption that there is something objective, something real out there to which you are holding on and to which you project qualities of desirability or qualities of kind of undesirability, something that is either attractive or unattractive, and based on what kind of qualities that you project, you feel either attracted to it or you feel repulsed by it. So underlying this strong emotional response is an assumption there is something out there, there is some kind of objective reality, some kind of objective entity with almost like kind of an existential status or being some kind of absolute, some kind of real object. However, if you understand that through your understanding of emptiness, that there is nothing intrinsic, there is no intrinsic reality to things and events, then of course this will automatically give you the understanding that even these emotions, strong emotions, no matter how real and strong they seem, they are baseless. They have no valid ground, they have no valid basis. And once you understand that they are based upon a sort of a fundamental misknowledge or misconception, then the emotions themselves becomes baseless and untenable. Whereas if your understanding of emptiness is not thorough in the sense that it hasn't succeeded in negating any notion of intrinsicness, then of course your attitude towards that kind of emotion will not be the same, because you may feel that that kind of emotion is in some sense valid or justified.
So that 뒤편에 차당을 놓게야겠다. 차당을 놓게야지. 심어르디 다 유 동반이기다. 동반이 그 소리. 고아로 야고 샤바이나 뒤니 유근 나다들이 인구 열에 사바지가 놀이야 또 샤르이나 any 신의 르 차다 그렇게도 하도 any emotion 쑥하고 제베 그돌이야 any 르 지나로 그렇게 다도 저 것도는 직도 셰트하시도.
So once you have developed certain understanding intellectually,
가다 댄징이 이 차당 르 멍실지 댄징이 치기가 되거든. 직도 셰트하시도.
So once you have developed a certain understanding of emptiness, be it intellectual understanding, you will have a certain kind of outlook, certain kind of orientation towards things and events. And then you can compare that to your own natural responses to events or objects and see how, to a very large degree, a very large extent, often we tend to project things, qualities or things on the objective world, or on the world. And especially we realize that much of the strong emotions that we feel arises from an assumption in something that is unreal, something that is baseless. And so through this way, you may be able to experientially gain some kind of sense that there is a gap, there is a disparity between the way you perceive things and where things really are.
자장가 다 근데 인도산에 묘몽기 릭디디 아니 잡지 참아매 돼봐. 잡지 참아매 돼봐지. 차이야. 묘몽기 진베 진단텔레 딱답에 친질로 진단 딱답에 친질로 인정해 지기 담에 더 싫었어야지 기하여 돼봐. 담에 더 싫었어야지 불지여 돼봐. 다 디니부디 지게 다도 신 지게 다 매버 신댕에 니부디 뭐부 찍려면에 진단 뭐가도 여대봐 인도산에 로니부디 내셔널지 신대버지 세부차 내셔널지 침배 원에 잡된 거 참아 입을로디 겁나 공부 슉슉 드라이 되버지다 잡진 참아 매댕에디 아니 공부 가서 올다 슉슉 드라이 매되버지 디니 원에 된진 슉충 로트야디 디선에 셔도.
So from all of this, the conclusion that we can draw, or the morale that we can draw from all of this, is the fact that much of our strong emotions, the emotions that afflict our mind, arises from a fundamental state of confusion, which tends to apprehend things as real and things as intrinsically existent or independent. And so we know that these emotions, these afflictive emotions and thoughts, have no valid support, neither in our experience, nor in reality, or nor in reason. In contrast, there is, your insight into the emptiness of things is not only grounded in reason, but also it is grounded in your experience. And there is a valid support. Not only that, but your understanding of emptiness and your grasping at things as real and intrinsic, they are directly opposite to each other. So one harms the other, one destroys the other. And given that they are both opposing forces, given that one lacks any valid support or grounding, whereas the other has, valid grounding in our experience and reason and reality. So the conclusion we can draw from here is that the more we develop our understanding of emptiness, the more we deepen our understanding of emptiness, the greater the power of that insight becomes. It can be enhanced. The more we see through the deception of these emotions, the weaker the force of emotion can become. So the conclusion we can draw is that the strong afflictive emotions and thoughts and their basis, which is this fundamental ignorance, are something that can be minimized, that can be weakened, whereas the opposite forces, the insight into emptiness, is something that could be enhanced. So through our reflections so far, we have arrived at a point where we can conceivably accept that the delusions, the afflictive emotions, and also their basis, which is the fundamental ignorance, is something that we can weaken in its force. But the question now remains whether it is possible at all to completely eliminate it, completely eradicate it, root it out from our mind or psyche. Here, I feel that perhaps reflecting upon sort of some of the points stated in Maitriya's Uttara Tantra, Sublime Continuum, may be very, very critical. According to that text, Uttara Tantra, there is an understanding that so far as the potential for knowing is concerned, it is something that is intrinsic to our consciousness. It is something that is inherent. It is something that is a natural quality of our mind. And whereas all the various afflictions of the mind, the pollutants, these are not really essential part of our mind. They are separable from our essential nature of mind. They are loburua, which means advantages. So when we talk about gaining perfect wisdom of the Buddha, we should not have a notion that we are in some sense sort of creating qualities that are not there from somewhere, from outside. Rather, we should see it more in terms of a potential that is being realized. So the pollutants of the mind comes in the way of the natural expression of the potential that is already inherent in our consciousness. So this, it is as if the capacity to know without obstruction is there in our consciousness or in our psyche, but it is the pollutants that afflicts our mind, which in some sense obscures or hinders our potential to express fully or be developed fully. So once our understanding of the nature of mind is informed by this concept of essential nature of mind as a mere pure luminosity and mere experience or the capacity to know, then by understanding that all the pollutants of the mind, the afflictions of the mind, are something that could be removed, then we can conceive the idea of the possibility of total eradication or elimination of these pollutants.
So that digo taba tugyadi nyomo seru in bade dusi tugu do sometimes
So this is how one can sort of conceptualize the possibility of attaining moksha, how afflictions of the mind are capable to be removed, and how liberation can be attained or moksha could be attained.
That the gopa de tenlia gopa shiwa janum minjums keshu shishe. That the adachi bangji nyembu top jomni the that cheve gopa. The any ko maso pando yedo gopa yedo shiwe ran shinba be janum. Any tentum never do, Yunjili, tentum never do. The that catch you.
So in the scriptures, such moksha or state of liberation is characterized in terms of 4 qualities or 4 features. It is described as the true peace, because that is the state of total tranquility, where the individual has attained a total freedom from all the pollutants of the mind. And it's also described as it's totally satisfying, because you have reached, in some sense, ultimate satisfaction. And it is also described as the definite emergence. You have definitely emerged from the unenlightened process. Sorry, the first one is the cessation, yeah. So these are the 4 features, being cessation, which is the true cessation of all suffering and the continuum of afflictions, cessation, peace, true peace, totally satisfying, and definite emergence.
That is about third phenomenon. That if that kind of goal is something very possible, or then now you say how to achieve that. Now that question becomes very important.
So this takes us to the 4th noble truth, that is the true path.
The lamji tempa setiadi thagi ganda shediagi toni musum to lochilia and lamden shell. Lamden what I'm going to talk shell.
So when we talk about true paths, so when we talk about true paths leading to liberation or moksha, from the point of view of, according to the Madhyamaka explanation, true path should be understood in terms of a direct, intuitive realization of emptiness. That's the true path. And this is the path, this direct, intuitive realization of emptiness would directly lead to the attainment of cessation. But in order to attain such direct intuitive realization of emptiness, one must have the basis, which is sort of a single-pointed meditative experience, sort of experiential knowledge of emptiness. So when the individual attains that experiential, meditatively arisen experiential knowledge of emptiness, that is said to be the beginning of, in the Buddhist language, technical language, called the path of linking or path of preparation. And the point where individual has gained direct intuitive realization of emptiness is said to be the path of seeing. However, the experiential knowledge of emptiness derived from meditative practices, in turn, must be based on an initial intellectual, inferential understanding or cognition of emptiness. Without that, there is no possibility of attaining meditatively based experience of emptiness. So, and that initial stage of developing the inferential cognition of emptiness is part of what is known as the path of accumulation. And the real, I suppose, the threshold of the path of accumulation is the point where the individual practitioner has gained a genuine aspiration to attain liberation, the moksha. That is the beginning of the path. However, in order to prepare oneself to embark upon such a path, the path of accumulation, path of linking, or path of seeing, of course it requires a lot of preparations, the grounds that needs to be prepared. And so we are talking about now practices at the beginner stage, the initial stage, where the most important practice is the practice of the three higher trainings, the trainings in morality, concentration or meditation, or wisdom or insight.
That the Tagian Shujagi, Zawaji, Lamo, woman, the Lam Komo to there, so in some woman is Sakoman to there, the Nyamshang and Payasta Shadwa. Nyamshang and Potashan, so do you to be she Koran, you should never shash, but Tagan, Lam Komo Pokumari. Chazanga, the nigger Tony Toby Yishiti, the Shira will love a change, that is so the Shlasumji. Do you to be Shlasumji in Anjoti? Kashurta, Shira will love all the chair. The only English level to go chair. The only Chanshik took that chamber the shishing that Toma, Betakasur, Ma Kasur, Kumjiru, Toma, go to Yagi, and then Chidumava. That is good.
So, in the scriptures, when the actual processes or the transition from one stage to another stage is described, it is often described in terms of meditators' experience. So, what is important here is to understand that the actual path on which the individual travels is the progressive and deepening knowledge and realization of emptiness. So that is known as the wisdom aspect of the path in the Buddhist technical language. And however, that wisdom, realizing emptiness, must be within the context where there is a union or a combination of single-pointedness of the mind and penetrative insight. So that is the union of shamatha and vipassana. So the true insight into emptiness must be in terms of a union of shamatha and vipassana. And however, in order to develop such true insights into emptiness, where there is a union of the two, of course, you require first to develop shamatha, the single-pointedness of the mind, which will then allow you to channel your energy and your concentration. And therefore, single-pointedness of the mind or shamatha training becomes key. And in order for the individual to have a successful training in shamatha, two factors are very important. These are application of the mindfulness and application of introspection or mental alertness. And the training in these two would be successful only if your single-pointedness of the mind is based on an ethically sound, disciplined way of life, where there is a discipline within your sort of outlook and within your life. So that, of course, we are talking about the importance of morality. So this is how the three trainings are connected with each other, linked with each other.
그게 년도에 택받아 다가는 지금 그게다 정주 선배다 택받아 즉 3월로 투문 냠는시야 장조 수준만으로 되고.
So all these practices of the three higher trainings, which is elaborated in the Buddhist scriptures, sometimes in the form of what is known as the 37 aspects of the path to enlightenment. These are all practices, all of these practices are common to both the Shravakayana, or the individual vehicle, or the Bodhisattva yana.
다 템바시만 대셔의 판에 최근조 세야지 용식세 다 최근조 뒷땡갱기 아니 템바 산지 좀 된데 아니 디스트리션 중에 저긴 뒤전에 다 떼었음 세야지 즉 쇠버려 샷도.
So to sum up, if your understanding of the Four Noble Truths is sort of arises from such reflections, deep reflections, then you will gain deep admiration towards the Dharma, which is the true refuge, and you will also gain develop a conviction in the possibility of actualizing Dharma within yourself, realizing Dharma within yourself. Once you have attained such conviction, then you will be able to develop genuine admiration to the Buddha, the master who showed the Dharma, the path. And if you are able to do that, then you will be also able to develop deep admiration in the Sangha, towards the Sangha members who are your spiritual companions on the path, who are all engaged in this ultimate quest to actualize Dharma, or realize Dharma within themselves. So through this way, when if your understanding of the three jewels is based on such profound understanding or reflection on the Four Noble Truths, then when you think about the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, then you will feel that there is a renewed sort of freshness. There is a kind of these three objects of refuge become sort of alive, come into life.
다들 잠들었지.
No.
다들 잠들었지. 딱 그게 뭐 잠들어 섬진 이거.
So this is what is meant by going for refuge. To sum up, I mean, all of this explanation is to show what is meant by going for refuge in the three jewels.
낭배축이 아니 자와디 다다 닝지 자와체 산지 때문에 닝지 자와체 디송도아.
Now, based on that understanding of taking refuge, we need to now look at another important perception of Buddhism, where there is an understanding that the entire teachings of the Buddha, the foundation is compassion. Compassion is the foundation of Buddha's teachings.
단 닝지 끊을란데 에네 단디샤. 자, 단 닝지 삼바디 믹스가래 타네. 야 야제다야. 나다 야제다야. 에니 셈 정다균이 다 셈지사리 거래.
So this practice of enhancing one's heart developing altruistic mind is aimed at deepening one's understanding of compassion and enhancing the compassionate potential that exists within oneself.
다 장주 심 고미알이야 아니 타마 땅님 거 봐. 심전 어떤데샤 당야라 장주 심사 그릇이 쓰고서 라베이나 장주 심스 돼야지 뭔도 전에 누가 인생 심스야래. 샤드 되니게 누베 교체 장주 되니게 누가도 충전도 해야 되는 아니 심지래 장주 심사래.
So based on such profound compassion, then one can develop altruistic aspiration to seek enlightenment for the benefit of all. So here, of course, we are talking about the generation of bodhichitta. And so what is meant by bodhichitta? In Maitriya's Abhisamaya Alamkara, bodhichitta, or this altruistic aspiration to attain enlightenment for the sake of others, is described as having two sort of motivating factors. One is genuine compassion towards all sentient beings, and the second one is the recognition of the need to attain full enlightenment in order to fulfill the well-being, welfare of other sentient beings.
So
in order to develop such bodhicitta, this altruistic mind, we need to develop a sense of responsibility, not just mere compassion towards others, but compassion with a sense of responsibility that you yourself would take upon yourself the task to help others. So this kind of sense of responsibility can only arise if you have generated genuine compassion, spontaneously arisen genuine compassion which pervades all sentient beings, and which is universal compassion. It's not partial, but rather universal towards all sentient beings. And such type of compassion is called great compassion, to distinguish it from ordinary compassion.
Mahakaruna.
So it is called Mahakaruna or great compassion.
That the day Ninjiti Yonalia charging that Dune Kanganare, Dune Mochevich. Nilia Kang Dungajanare, Simjalia, any Jeshipam Lokiach, Nikulu.
So, however, such type of compassion can only arise if you, first of all, have a genuine insight into the dukkha nature, genuine insight into the nature of suffering of oneself and other sentient beings. There is a true recognition of your state of being as a suffering. And not only that, but also there should be a genuine empathy, a genuine sort of connectedness with others, without which compassion cannot arise. So in order to have genuine compassion, you need not only realization of the suffering nature, but also there should be a sense of connectedness with others, other sentient beings, a kind of a natural empathy.
다 동네 상담이 되게 kontrol해야지. 동네 대표도 도균이 님이 상담 되게 하네. 용야지. 대성도 마세베 고과 고대 타고 탑네. 시워 쳐지고 통되나 더동 시리고 짠데 잡아 있는데 시고요.
And so far as gaining insight into the suffering nature is concerned, reflection on the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, will assist you in your deepening your insight into suffering. And not only that, but for an altruistic practitioner, it is important to recognize that attaining individual liberation alone is not adequate. Not only is it sort of individualistic, but also, even from the point of view of one's own perfectibility, gaining moksha or liberation alone is not full enlightenment. It is not. It's not a state of full awakening.
Then shendu dani ulo ya delia, simjana la jeshi pangbe lot tu ya delia, yana, ani malasobe da, simjana jalo malasobe nyendu, ten, ani jigi nyendu gyube niga tin chaya, dinero tane jeshi pangbe lot tu barisha.
So, one crucial point here, one crucial requirement here is, in order to develop genuine compassion, you need to have a natural empathy and sense of connectedness, with sense of closeness or intimacy with other sentient beings. And one of the ways in which one can enhance this empathy, natural empathy towards others, one of the techniques that is described in the Buddhist scriptures is to imagine or visualize all, sort of develop the recognition that all sentient beings are your mothers, and literally your mother. Sort of either as a mother or as someone who is sort of dearest to you, and then extend that perception towards all sentient beings. Through this way, you can develop a sort of a natural, a spontaneous empathy with others. However, such natural empathy towards all sentient beings cannot arise if you have fluctuating emotions towards others, which are based on discrimination. Viewing some as enemies and some as friends. So that fluctuation, that kind of fluctuating emotions based on discrimination has to be first overcome. Therefore, the practice of equanimity towards all becomes crucial. However, there is a different technique described in Shantideva's writings, Bodhisattva Charavatara, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where he explains a way of cultivating genuine empathy towards others, not so much based on recognition of others as your dearest, but rather as a way of developing equality of oneself with others. The fact that just as you yourself wish to be happy and overcome suffering, others too have the similar natural desire. Just as you have the right, others too have the right. So developing that sense of equality and then reversing your sort of perspectives, putting others in your place and then relating to them as dearer to yourself. Through that kind of process of training, there is another technique of cultivating a natural empathy or connectedness towards others. According to the Tibetan meditative tradition, these two different techniques are combined and then meditated upon. So, and the custom is that once, as a result of your reflection and practice and thinking and meditation, if you gain a sort of even a simulated experience of this altruistic mind, this compassion, then the custom is to stabilize that and reinforce that through participating in a ceremony where you explicitly generate the bodhicitta. And then this should be then, for a bodhisattva, should be followed by developing a keen desire to engage in the bodhisattva ideals, activities of the bodhisattva. So once the individual has successfully developed a keen interest and keen wish to engage in the bodhisattva activities of helping other sentient beings, then, according to the tradition, then such a person must take bodhisattva vows from that point. So the bodhisattva ideal, or the activities of the bodhisattva, could be summed up in what could be called the three precepts. One is the precept of refraining from negative actions. And the second one is precept of consciously or deliberately engaging in positive or virtuous actions. And the third one is the precept of helping others.
Now, yang chua shida thane debu du thane shebe yin debu lagji jodang thane shebe yin sonang chua de yishik chua ni shebe.
And from the point of view of how causal kind of practices lead to a resultant state, bodhisattva practices are sometimes also described in terms of the two accumulations, the accumulations of merit and accumulations of wisdom.
Dinde tabshi nibuti sosu yager shimbeina yangal shimbeina digi hamare tabji simbe shirabji simbe tabshi sungji guga.
So the accumulations of merit and wisdom are sort of the two aspects of the union, the two elements of the union of method and wisdom. And in the Buddhist path, these two aspects of the path, the fundamental aspects of the path, union and method, method and wisdom, should always be united. They should not be separated.
Tadi tabshi sungdu redang thwalaya ani ngag subjection ne thang.
And it is on the practice of the unifying method and wisdom where the profundity and the sophistication of the tantric or vajrayana practice comes or arises.
Mibol hogulus sen, mibol hogulus seve thane mare ta mibol hogul ta ranglu nyala tungni kom ta rang ta nyala tungni kom ni en bet sig nuju en rang ge phungbu ma da phungbu samolo en tongbe yin su pha ka so le long ma sha che dene tungni to be lo dini me mo le ya dini 신랑 하고 나나발 샤더사 되는 하고 나발 샤 대베 하고 텔라 미네 서 하이 콜로 텔라 미네 나발을 하시는 분이에요. 다 돈이 공부하래. 뒤에 사실 님이 있어야 탑시 님이 시가 되네.
To sort of put it very briefly, one of the unique features of the union of method and wisdom in the Vajrayana teachings is that there the practitioner first subjects all his or her perception of self and the world to an understanding of emptiness and dissolves everything into emptiness. And from within that, and that very cognition or understanding of emptiness is then, of course, at the imaginative level at the beginning, is visualized into a sort of a perfected form of a deity, of a meditational deity. And once you have that visualization of the deity, then you reflect upon, again, the non-substantial or empty nature of that deity. So what you find here is that complete within one instance of a cognition, both aspects of the method and wisdom, there is a visualization of the deity, yet at the same time there is an understanding or there is a comprehension of the empty nature of the deity at the same time. So within one single instance of a cognitive act, you have both the method and wisdom complete.
Any sanga gyudi shishebe, any gyudi omanilia, tamji sunya yawamato, dombara mise memory. Ngaji domba mise zoshin sung memory. Then Nanjo Gyuda, Nanjo Lami Gyuda, ngaji domba sunya shebere.
So within the Vajrayana sort of tradition, principally speaking, there are four principal classes of Tantra. The first two classes of Tantra, there is no involvement of taking tantric vows or Vajrayana vows. It is from the Yoga Tantra, and it is in the Yoga Tantra and Anuttara Yoga Tantra, the highest Yoga Tantra, where the individual practitioners takes tantric vows. And in the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, highest Yoga Tantra, then there are various meditative practices which are aimed at utilizing various physiological elements as well, such as visualizing on the energy channels, the energies that flow within the channel, and then visualizing on subtle drops and so on. So the point is, in all of these various types of meditations, the key really is the meditation on bodhichitta, the altruistic aspiration, and insight into the emptiness. Without these two factors, none of them would even be considered a Buddhist practice. So, even the tantric practices, the visualization, so long as they are divorced, or devoid of bodhicitta and understanding of emptiness, they are not even Buddhist practices. However, in very reliable and authentic texts belonging to Yoga Tantra, there is an understanding that Vajrayana path could be also based on the philosophical understanding of emptiness, of a Chittamatra school as well, not necessarily a Madhyamaka. However, I feel that in order to have a comprehensive practice of Tantra, in order to attain full realization of Tantric path, Vajrayana path, I think insight into emptiness based on the Madhyamaka understanding is crucial. So, just as one of the questions, in one of the questions, the point was raised about the difficulty of continuing to practice Tantra. I think it is very true that so long as you are not able to establish a firm grounding in the basic practices of the Buddha Dharma, such as that we have been talking about throughout our sessions, without these groundings and the foundational parts, even supposedly profound practices of the Vajrayana path will have no effect. Therefore, The point is that it is important to understand that for a practicing Buddhist, developing understanding and meditation on the Four Noble Truths is really crucial. Therefore, meditation as a part of your practice becomes really critical. And when talking about meditation, it is important to bear in mind that your meditation should contain both elements of a meditation, both single-pointedness and also an analytic or penetrative.
Then another important factor is determination. And you should not think these development can take place within a few days or few years. We must understand, you see, that these development even may take eons. So you say our determination, if we consider as a Buddhist and want to really practice as a Buddha Dharma, then right from the beginning, you must, you see, make up your mind. Or doesn't matter, even may take millions of billions of eons. Doesn't matter. You see, after all, what is the purpose of our life? The meaning of existence? Nothing. You realize something positive. Then even you see days and months or eon, it is meaningful. If you're really wasting our life, purpose of our life, then even one day, too long. Once you're determined, once you make up your mind, some kind of firm determination and clear objective way, and then time is not important. So they like you see, Shantadeva is one of the, you see, prayer. There's so long space remain, so long sentient beings, suffering remain, I will remain in order to serve. So that sentence really gives me some kind of inner stand, and also I think inspiring. So the more sort of, you see, the impatience, and as I mentioned before, you see, they want something the quickest or best or something, then I think result also poorest, I think. The cheapest method, quickest, cheapest method, result will be poorest. So you see, no. So you see, that's I think wrong. So that I would like to share with you. So that's why you see, I myself, although you see, recite some mantra or you see some visualization, you see certain mandalas, but in my daily practice, although my practice very poor, but even then, you see, my main emphasis on this Four Noble Truth and bodhichitta and karuna. So that really, I feel, is something practical benefit. Then through these practice, you will get something practical benefit. Visualization is big deities. Sometimes I think cheating oneself. Almost is like cheating oneself.
Deceiving oneself.
Deceiving oneself. So therefore, I think, you see, we must practice step by step, and with patience, with determination. Once you involve or dedicated or determined practice, then some improvement you can see. You see, year by year, at least decade by decade, then you can see, at least some change, some improvement you can see. Once you see that, that also gives you some kind of new encouragement. So see, change, not easy. So as a Buddhist brothers, sisters, that is my talk. And now important thing is, If you consider as a Buddhist, then please implement. Should not remain just on intellectual level. The practice or teaching must be part of our life, And not only Buddhist, but other, you see, the practitioner or believer, say it's a Christian or Muslim or Jews, or whatever way,
whatever your faith.
Whatever your faith. The faith, if you accept, then must be part of your life. It is not sufficient just in Sunday attend this church and remain like that few moments, and outside nothing there. That is not sufficient. Whether you are physical, whether in your cathedral or not, I think the teaching of your own religion must in your heart always. That's very important. Then you get experience of real value. Otherwise, it's just a knowledge here. When you face some real problem, won't happen. This teaching once become part of your life, then real problem is come contact. Then you see that teaching gives you inner strength. And finally, when we become older, old age, and incurable illness, and finally death comes, then you see that you see practice really gives you some kind of inner guarantee. So that's important. After all, death is part of our life. Nothing is strange. Sooner or later, we have to pass that I think main gate. We have to pass through that way. So whether there is a next life or not, at that time, the peace of mind is a very crucial factor. So how to achieve peace of mind at that moment? If you have some experience in
your daily life,
in yourself, that will provide some kind of inner strength. No one else, no deities, no gurus, no other cannot provide. That's why you see Buddha says, you are your own master. So that's very important. Thank you. So then you see,
So after that marvelous instruction on what we all have to do in order to attain enlightenment and liberation, the Dalai Lama himself is a living example that I think we all really need to see. Someone, a living human being, who's actually doing this, is not just talking about it. And one always feels when you're in the presence of the Dalai Lama that he is definitely one who is practicing what he's preaching. And just the very spirit behind it, the whole Dhamma comes forth and shines. And we feel tremendous connectedness to His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a living example of the Buddha Dhamma in a living form that we can actually see. And due to his compassion, he makes himself available to us here in the West. And also he's been a great inspiration for all of us here in the United Kingdom, with the network of Buddhist organizations coming together, making some effort to learn how to dialogue with each other, to cooperate in some generous effort in the true spirit of Buddha Dhamma. as inspired by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So I have here a gift from the network of Buddhist organizations of this beautiful tanka that's hanging above His Holiness. So I want to offer this, and with all sincere gratitude and appreciation for this wonderful instruction, the Four Noble Truths never fails you. If you practice it, it goes on and on in your life and applies to almost every aspect and every experience that a human being can possibly have. It is a grand and a great teaching, even though it looks relatively simple in four truths, the whole universe and the experience of liberation is made available to us. I'd like to offer this to His Holiness.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd also like to express gratitude for everyone to Mr. Thubten Jimpa, who's been the translator for the Dalai Lama.
That's awesome. So finish. Thank you. Goodbye.